Hi students, we're back with our third video in the series on Lightroom for Project 1. We're going to now look at the development module in Lightroom and how it works to actually correct color temperature and exposure. So let's take a look at that now. So here's Lightroom. We're going to go ahead and expand Lightroom just so we can see it. Here's Project 1, and this is Part 1 where we've got our 9 images in our folder here. We're going to start with image number 6 or 7. Please go by the project parameters. I may have these a little mixed up in here, but I want you to actually set the white balance for each one of these. So we're going to start with part 6 or number 6 here, and we're going to color correct this and also fix the values of the exposure, because right now I can tell it's off. It is off. It is a little too dark. So let's go to the development module. We've got the image selected, so we're going to go to develop, and it's going to bring that image directly up on screen here. So we've got the image. On the far left, you'll find a navigator. This is actually for increasing the size. You can actually zoom in hitting these buttons here, or you can fit it back to the screen. There are other options for doing this. I'll show you those later, where you can actually change the size. There is a couple of options here on the side that you can actually use too if you'd like. Down below that are presets. We're going to shy away from presets currently, and also the copy and paste down here at the bottom. We do have some options down here, but we're going to stay in, right now we're going to stay in the regular mode. There are comparison modes, and I'll show you those at a later date. Right now, we're just interested in this gray card and how it looks, and we want to actually get it to be in a true gray card. So to do that, we're going to, first of all, we're going to come over to our development module parts over here. This is over here on this side. This is all of our development. It's just like Camera Raw. So if you've used Camera Raw in the past, this is just like Camera Raw. It actually has a few more features than Camera Raw, which is nice. But if you scroll down through here, you can see all the features that Lightroom has. And we're going to go over all these features in the next project, but currently we're just going to stick with very basic principles in here. The first principle is we're going to grab the eyedropper right here, and we're going to set the white balance for our image by coming over here and clicking. Now, the great thing about the little pick a target neutral section right there that pops up right below the icon, the eyedropper icon, is that it allows us to find the most neutral area in our gray card using the pixels themselves. We're going to go ahead and just find a good spot. We don't want to be over here where there's a you can see the gray card's a little worn. We don't want to be on any of those worn sections. We want to find a nice sweet spot here where there's just a good gray card, and that's somewhat halfway between, because it's a little brighter at the top than it is down here at the bottom. So we're going to stick it about halfway just to make sure we get the kind of the correct exposure too, or working with the correct exposure. So here you can see that the numbers down there are R, G, and B. Are pretty neutral actually, so we're just going to neutralize that all together just to fix the color here. It added a little bit of magenta, and it also knocked down the blues just a bit, and that color is now perfect at that one spot. If we ever find that we feel like it's wrong, I feel kind of like it's a little on the magenta side, I'm going to slide around in here and see if I can find a little bit better spot maybe to choose from. That's better. That's a much cleaner and much better color. I've got a +4 on my magenta here slider, and I've also got my color temperature hasn't really changed much here in the blues, but the color is much better now. So we've actually got a much cleaner color for our image. If we wanted to, we could actually use these sliders to adjust our white balance. We could also choose any of these as shot, tungsten, if we wanted it to look a certain color or a certain way. So those options are there. But for right now, all I want you to do is just set the white balance using the card itself, and but just make sure that it looks clean and the color looks good. Or the only other thing we're going to do is we're going to come down here to exposure, and we're going to change this exposure. It's a little dark right now. We're going to use those middle values, and I'm just going to pull this up, and um, using the histogram up here in the center, I can tell it's dark. Let's just take this back to 0 here. I can tell that this is dark because here's my gray card right here. These are the whites. They're way too far away from the white, by the way. But I'm not going to worry about them for this. There is also some blacks down here, and that's caused by the edge of the table. What I want you to do is I want you to get this section right here, right into the center here, because that is where our gray card is actually supposed to be. So let's bring this up. Our exposure is off a little bit, and let's get our gray card right there to that sweet spot right there in the center. We were off, this shot was off by almost a stop, not quite a stop, but if we now take and hover over the gray card, especially right in that middle area, notice that I'm at 49.2. If I come over here and look at the histogram, underneath here when I go back over there to the image and I'm holding my icon over the image itself, you'll notice that there will be numbers that pop up here. See them? As I've gone back over to the image, they're now showing there, and I'm at 49, 48, 49.2, 49.3, 48.6. My blue is just a slight bit off in that section, but if I hover and move around a little bit, it changes. So in average, I'm pretty much right in average of being at a middle gray. So this is perfect. My whites are maybe not quite white yet, but it was a little bit of fall off behind the mannequin hit, so that's no problem. We're going to just leave this. This card is now corrected. We're going to go to the next card. It's going to be a little different because when we were doing this, we set the custom white balance on this gray card. This image should now look very similar to the image down here at the bottom. And I'm going to show you this just by going here into this section. And look how the custom white balance that we set in camera, and we set the exposure properly, looks almost exactly like the image that we just produced. This is how good the camera actually did with fixing our white balance and correcting for it. So we're just going to come back in here and go back to develop and make sure that we're selected on this image. We don't need this other image selected, so I'm just going to deselect it for the moment. That was just a good example of this. And as you can see, it's a little on the bright side actually in the midtones here, or in the mid area. If I come down here closer to the bottom, it's a little more correct. So the camera may have been reading a little closer to the bottom, but we want it to be exact. So I'm just going to darken this down just a slight bit. And see if I can get that in, and there it is, 50, right in the 50s range. So we've got that fixed. If we want, we can adjust, we can check the color. It really didn't make any changes. It's got a +5 there on our slider, but it really didn't change much at all. If you need to, if you would, please go ahead and correct the color for this as well as possible just by clicking here. Our exposure is corrected now, and what we're going to do is we're going to take that information and we're going to hit the command key or the control key on a PC, and we're going to click on this other image that is right next to it down here in the library. Now you can actually do this in the library too. It's faster in this mode here while you're in develop, where you can just hit sync. If you're in the library, there are two syncs. There's a sync and a sync settings. We'd want to choose sync settings instead if that's what we're doing. But these two images were shot at the same time. This was just the card was removed for the second image here. So we're looking at this image, the card was removed. So we want to sync the color on both of these and the exposure. So what I'm doing is I'm choosing both of them, and I'm going to make sure that the gray card is the selected down there in the and it is also on the screen, and we're going to hit sync, and we're going to check none on this, and then click white balance and exposure, because these are the only two things that we are changing today in Lightroom. So we're going to do these two, and then we're going to hit synchronize. And what it will do is, if you notice down here at the bottom, this has got some new tags on here. It's already got tags. This tag right here shows that it has keywords. The one next to it is it's got some development settings. This plus minus little icon down here at the bottom is basically telling us that we have some development settings. So if we go to this image now, this image is color corrected for our gray card. So this image is the same, has been fixed to the same values as this. So everything should be good, and we should have the perfect mannequin head. Now, we took a secondary shot right after this, and there may be one more that this is maybe why I'm having a problem with the number of images or the quantity of images here. There may be one more here. But this image pops up. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this gray card, and we didn't make any changes to the from here to here as far as color goes. The light's still the same. We're bouncing the light off of a white card. It should be still very similar. So I'm not going to change the color temperature on this one. All I want to do is just, I want to change the color temperature on this one to the same as my gray card here. So what I'm going to do is just make sure that my gray card's selected and that I've selected this image, and then I'm going to hit sync, and I'm going to make sure that I hit, I'm going to leave both of these exposures fine. It's just going to bring it up about 0.5, and I'm going to hit that, and we're going to come back here. And notice that my image is now color corrected. So we can come over here and we look, and it's color corrected. However, this image is too dark, and I believe in the on your sheet, I just recently changed this. This is why I don't have an extra image here. But you should have two images. There should be one that's too dark and then one that's corrected for value. So this image here, you may end up leaving it too dark. If that is not the instructions in the sheet, please just ignore what I've just said and change the exposure. So we're just going to adjust this exposure until we get it corrected. And once we've got that corrected, this is you can see that we had about a 1.5 fall off from bouncing that light off the card and onto our model, or on our head. So the mannequin head. So we've lost about 1.5. So we've actually lost that much by bouncing. So when you're correcting in your cameras for a bounce card or something like that, make sure that you're changing your exposure by about 1.5 stops, because you've lost that much information or that much light as the light is reflected off the card and back the mannequin head. So that's this part of the development module. Let's step into part 2. So we're going to go, we've corrected these now. These are all good to go. We're going to go to part 2 and work on part 2. This is very simple. We're going to do the exact same thing again. We're going to come over here to our development module once we've got those selected, and we're going to grab our eyedropper tool. We're going to come in here and click on the gray card, and we're going to get those colors corrected. And once we do that, then we're also going to adjust until we get this. Now, I can see that there's a big difference here. There must have been an issue with the car, with where the card was sitting and everything. The exposure actually looks good for the mannequin head itself. So I'm not going to mess with this exposure too much. I'm just going to make sure that the mannequin head is white like it should be. That up here, the value ranges for that white head. If I come over here and hover, are around 96 on the cheek. That's a really bright area. And around 84 to 86 on the histogram for this highlight. So we don't want them to go past that. We're going to leave this alone. This gray card just may have not got enough light, but we were able to actually color correct. We're going to then come down here to our film strip, hit the Shift key, and click on the last image there. Come over here to sync, and we're going to make sure that the white balance and exposure are being corrected. we're going to hit synchronize, and that's going to take care of all of the images, and they will have all been color corrected. And there we are. So we have our color correction. They actually all look just a slight bit yellow to me as I'm looking at this. So I might have just chosen a little bad spot. I'm going to take this back down to 2700 here, right at where it told me originally I was. And I'm just going to resync these real quick and actually fix that white balance for all of them so that they're all looking nice and neutral. There we go. That is so much better. So our images are nice and neutral now. I've got good color here on my imagery, and all of them I have corrected for my values across the board. If I was down working on another part of the project, so let's go back here and just take a look. We would want to go to part 3, do the same thing, except here I have a little different card in here. This is a different color calibrating card, so I'd want to correct for this. So I would do the exact same thing. I'd come in here, click on this, click my card. It actually fixed my color. But I can tell my density is just way off on this exposure here. So I'm going to just correct the density. And I'm going to watch the histogram up here as I change this exposure so that I get those values right about where they should be for for the whites. So my exposure must have been off a little bit because I used this card instead of a gray card. And so I didn't get a good reading on this when I put my gray card in there. Once I've fixed that, I'm going to again just once I've got the color fixed, once I've got all the and the white balance fixed, I'm going to choose all of the images down here at the bottom in the film strip and hit sync, and make sure that the white balance and exposure is synced, and it's going to run across, and it's going to fix all the color for each one of my images. And this should be this dark. I'm using barn doors here. I'm blocking light from hitting the background, as you can see. The images, and you can see a little bit of blue in here. I think I was wearing a blue shirt that day. This is why you should probably wear a neutral colored shirt or a darker colored shirt so you don't bounce any color into the actual image here. So you can see a little blue from actually where my shirt was reflecting onto the mannequin head, so we don't want that to happen. So neutral black, a nice black shirt when you come in, or a white shirt. White shirt can reflect light, so a nice gray shirt, but anything just to keep it from catching some of the color off of any bright colored clothing can be very helpful when you're shooting in the studio. So we can actually see each of our images are color corrected here. And so that part's done, that section's done. We continue doing this all the way down to number 7 here, and then also for part 8, which I do not have loaded in here. I don't have those images in the system. I'll need to actually add some at some point for other purposes at another time. But for right now, you can just come down through here and do all of these, including part 8. Just color correct each one of those with your gray cards. So if in part 8, if you've moved the lights or changed the color, or if you move the lights back or something, you may need to. You've probably put another gray card in there. Changed your exposure. You might want to actually fix any of the images after that gray card for the new color that you are using. So, or that for the color balance that would need to be changed for those images that are getting more fall off. That would actually help you to adjust your images. This is how you adjust all your images and your exposure in Lightroom. The last thing that we're going to do is look at opening an image, and I'm just going to choose an image here to open in Photoshop, just to bring you into Photoshop and how to get to Photoshop from here. So if we had our images for metal or fur or for our cloth imagery in here, and we wanted to actually take that image to Photoshop, what we're going to do is we could do it 2 ways. The first way, the main way that I do it all the time, is to just make sure that you're in the library, right-click on the image, go to Edit In, edit in Photoshop. Once you click this, this is going to take the file, and this is new, so if you want, you can always click and put "Don't show that again." This is a new little dialog box they just put in here. I'm not sure why it says all this, because Lightroom, Lightroom is updated with Camera Raw right now, but this box pops up anyway. So what we're going to do is we're just going to tell it to render using Lightroom. So we're going to use the Lightroom capabilities that we just applied to this image. We're going to use those capabilities by using render using Lightroom. So we're going to click on this, open it up, and Photoshop will automatically open. Now, I want to show you the saving properties of this and how it works too while we're at it. So the cool thing about Photoshop and Lightroom is, because they're both Adobe products, they work together really well. And once Photoshop gets open here, what we're going to do is we're going to save the file, and then we're going to jump back to Lightroom, and what we're going to do, we'll make a couple of changes to the image just to be able to see them really easy. We'll jump back to Lightroom, and that file is going to be back in Lightroom. So our PSD file, which we'll be saving it as, will be in Lightroom, which is cool. Now, Lightroom has a tendency of making either TIFFs, and in this case it did. In your preferences, you can change this from either TIFF, to PSD, which is Photoshop file, or you can use a TIFF. I'm neutral on it either way. I find that I do most everything in PSDs anymore instead of TIFFs. But so if you want, what I want you to do is you could go to, especially with your first stuff, just hit Save As. And as you do this, you're going to change this to PSD, to Photoshop, and this will be for your FUR file. And you'll notice that there is a TIFF already in here. That's what it's a new thing that Lightroom's doing. It automatically creates the file for you, and that can be really annoying. So just be aware of that. That is a part of the program. It will go ahead and create that file in here, which maybe sometimes I want to go direct, maybe I do want to switch the file to PSD or whatever, and it has already created a TIFF in there. We're going to go ahead and hit Save on here, and just hit, they'll have Edit in this, and we'll hit Save. And now that we've got a PSD, it shows up here as a PSD file. Let's just make some kind of crazy correction here. So I'm just going to go to solid color, and let's change this to red, and change this over to, let's go down here and do color. And so that just changed the color altogether for the image, and we'll hit Save, File, and Save. And then we're going to close this file as soon as it's done saving. We're going to close it, and we're going to go right back over here to Lightroom. And in my Lightroom catalog, because I had to save it out as a new type of file, as a PSD file, it lost track of those files, but it did put the original TIFF that it saved for us in here. Now, since it didn't bring in, and I was hoping it would bring the file in, it didn't, because of the way it's now working. It used to do this, but it doesn't anymore. What we're going to do is we're going to have to import that file. We could either go to Import and import it, or the other option is to go to up here to Part 3, right-click, go to Sync Folder, Import New Photos. Now, we could show Import dialog box. I have had some issues with this. If I've got a preset set in the import dialog box, the preset would automatically be added to this. So sometimes I'll make sure that I select this so that it shows me the import. Right now you can just import the file directly in, scan for metadata updates, and hit synchronize. What this is going to do is it's going to go in, it's going to find that file, there it is, and it has now added it to the folder. So let's go to the, let's see, what was that in? That was in part 3. There it is now added into your folder here. So that's how you can actually bring, if you're missing a file, you can't find it, you know it's in the folder on the hard drive, just import it into the drive, and there it is. It's brought right into Lightroom. We still have that TIFF right here that has no changes, and that's okay. We could then, if we go to reopen these, if we need to make some changes to this, let's say we definitely want to make changes to one of these 2 files, we go over here to the file itself and we right click and we go to edit in and edit in Photoshop. Now this dialog box is going to pop up. This is very important. If you've made any changes to the file as you were in here in Lightroom, you're going to want to add those Lightroom adjustments and click edit a copy. So it will create a new copy, a new either in TIFF format or PSD format, and it would create that using this your new Lightroom adjustments if you made changes in here. You could edit a copy, which it would make another copy of this, and then you could edit that copy in Photoshop, or you can just do the original. I just want to work on the original because I added this pink cast here, and maybe I want to change that pink cast. So I just go make sure it's clicked on Edit Original, hit Edit, and it's going to reopen it in Photoshop. There it is, just popped right up in Photoshop. And let's say I want to just make, I didn't quite like this pink, or this red, and I want to make it orange instead, and I hit OK, and so there's that, and then I hit Command S on my keyboard. It saves it, and once it's done saving, I'm going to close it. You can also, if you already know you're done editing, you can hit close. It won't, it'll usually pop up with a dialog box. It'll close as soon as it's done, and that's fine. So then we go back to Lightroom, and you can see that it automatically saw that change and it brought it up here. I have had Lightroom on occasion not see the changes. If it does that, click on the development module, let the image pop up, and then go back to the library. It's weird in that way sometimes. Usually when I've been working on multiple images very quickly, I've made a lot of changes to each of those images and it just doesn't want to read the preview very well. It can actually mess up that way. That is how to develop your images in Lightroom, and also to take them directly to Photoshop and get your changes made in Photoshop. For project 1, you do need to go into take your one fur, one cloth, and one metal image into Photoshop. Make your corrections in there, anything that you want to do to it, any cloning, healing, exposure, changes, dodging and burning, any of those things, please do those. Show me what you can do with your files and what you can do with Photoshop, because I really want to see your skills, your skill set, so I can see kind of where you're at in your Photoshop skills. From here, what we're going to do next is I'm going to come back with another video and show you how to make contact sheets. And we'll also be looking at exporting our files. So head on over to the next video, and thank you for taking a look at this.